There are things we notice too late. A shadow that shouldn't fall where it does. A color that doesn't belong in the familiar pattern of a life. And sometimes 6 years too late, we see what was always there, hanging in plain sight, dry in the desert wind. This is a story about a photograph, about laundry, and about the kind of silence that settles over a place. When people vanish and the only voice left speaking is the one inside a folded note on a kitchen counter. Let me take you to Red Mesa, Utah, to the place where the desert meets the sky in layers of cream and rust, where the air tastes like dust and sage, and where, on a certain Saturday in 1974, a family of 7 walked out their front door and never came back. Picture this. Late morning light spilling through the tall windows of a church cultural hall, the kind of light that catches dust and makes it glow. Fast Sunday. The testimonies have ended. The hymns have faded, and most of the congregation has gone home to Sunday dinners and quiet afternoons. But a small group remains. They gather around a folding table covered in photographs, children's drawings in crayon, a Relief Society ribbon, and, at the center, preserved in a clear plastic sleeve, a handwritten note that has haunted them for 6 years. Gone to visit family for stake matters. Back Monday. Animals covered. Miriam's handwriting. Naomi's tiny heart drawn in the margin. The way she always signed notes inside the house, even when no one was supposed to know which wife had written what. Aaron Whitaker. His wives, Miriam and Naomi. Their 5 children, Eli, Michael, Sarah, Ruth, and little Daisy. 7 people. Vanished on a Saturday morning with bread, still cooling on the counter. Caleb Whitaker stands at the table now, holding that note for what must be the 100th time. He's Aaron's younger brother, the one left behind to remember, to arrange these annual gatherings, to keep asking the questions that have no answers. Around him, the others speak in low voices. Mary, Miriam's closest friend from Relief Society. Rebecca, a cousin who checked every relative from Provo to Canada and found nothing. Daniel, a construction worker who'd helped Aaron frame houses one summer near Page. They've told these same stories before, gone over the same ground. But something about this year feels different. Daniel holds up a photograph. Not a new one. The sheriff's office made copies years ago. It shows the Whitaker family on their front porch, 2 days before they disappeared. Aaron in his white shirt and BOLO tie. Miriam holding baby Daisy. Naomi standing just behind them, chin tipped down, uncertain whether she belongs in the frame. The older children lined up like stir steps, smiling, and behind them, barely visible but unmistakable, the clothesline heavy with Saturday wash. Daniel's voice cuts through the quiet, careful and slow. They were leaving for the weekend. Morning photograph. So why is there wet laundry on the line? The question hangs in the air like smoke. You have to understand something about these communities, about the way life works when you live at the edge of the desert, in a place where faith and family are the same word, where a man might have 2 wives, and the war pretends not to see what it doesn't want to acknowledge. The Creek, they call it, the fundamentalist community out near the Red Rock Ridge. Split-level homes with long, continuous roof lines, extra doors, separate kitchens under one roof. One man, multiple wives, sister wives sharing space and children in the quiet, complex choreography of plural marriage. Aaron's house sat at the end of the sun-cracked lane between the mainstream ward and the creek, a bridge between worlds. Miriam and Naomi alternated weeks in the master bedroom. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, a rhythm as ordinary to them as sacrament on Sundays. And on that Saturday morning, one of them had hung laundry to dry. Caleb stares at the photograph now, really looks at it for the first time in 6 years. White shirts, denim, soft pastels, the everyday colors of a family's life. And then something else, a rectangle of fluorescent yellow, bright, Wrong. Stabbing through the gentle pattern like a warning no one heard. High-vis fabric. Reflective paint spelling out letters. P.O.L. Mary leans in close, her breath catching. Is that a police vest? The room goes very still. Deputy Paul Brenner. The name surfaces in Caleb's mind like something rising from deep water. Brenner was the one who checked in on the Creek folks, who said he respected their ways, who ate Sunday dinner at Aaron's house once a month, and helped move hay with the elders' quorum, even though he wasn't LDS himself. Brenner was the one who ran the investigation when they disappeared. He filed a report, interviewed the neighbors, told everyone that the note seemed genuine, that Aaron had probably taken his family to visit relatives for church business, that these things happened in tight-knit communities, that sometimes people needed space. The investigation lasted less than a week, and then nothing, silence, the kind that grows louder with every passing year. But now this photograph, this vest in Miriam's laundry. Why would a deputy's uniform be hanging on Aaron Whitaker's clothesline the day his family vanished? Caleb's late wife Ruthie had boxed up the Whitakers' belongings when hope began curdling into something harder. Personal things. Clothes. Papers. Things too painful to look at, but too precious to throw away. If the vest hadn't been claimed, it might still be there. In the cedar chest. In the room with the window, facing the ridge. I'll go look, Caleb says. His voice sounds strange in his own ears. And if it's his, I'll return it to the deputy myself, face to face. They pack up the photographs with the careful hands of people who've learned not to rush grief. By 11:30, the cultural hall is empty again, the echoes swallowed by thick gym curtains. But something has shifted. A thread has been pulled. And somewhere in the desert heat, 6 years of silence is beginning to crack. If you believe stories like this should be told, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. The Washington County Sheriff's substation sits at the edge of town, low brick with an American flag snapping in the canyon wind. The lobby smells of coffee and floor wax. A young deputy behind the glass looks up as Caleb approaches. I'm here to see Deputy Brenner. Paul, it's a personal matter. Brenner's in the field. Might be a while. Caleb nods. I'll try later. I should give this back in person. But as he drives toward the creek, toward the ridge, something catches his eye. 2 men in dark, unmarked uniforms standing on the shoulder near a long roof house. A fundamentalist father, Jacob Yates, one of Aaron's old work buddies, has his hands up, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. This land is held in trust. It's my family's home. Times change, one of the men replies. No badge, no patch, only a slick smile. Our clients are making a generous offer. You can relocate. Better land, better life. There's no better land than the one we're covenanted to. Leave. Caleb pulls over, steps between them and Jacob. He's asked you to go. Do it, or we call the sheriff. The second man stoops, drops a business card in the dirt. Land Development Associates. Plain black text. No address, only a phone number. We'll be back. They leave in a black truck, gravel chirping under heavy tires. Jacob's jaw is tight. This has been every day this week. They don't say what they're building, just progress. Like that word is a bulldozer. Caleb stares at the card in the dust, and then he says something that makes his throat catch. 6 years ago, the year Aaron disappeared. Men like that came around too. Then they stopped, and we had nothing but silence. Jacob's eyes dropped to the vest draped over Caleb's arm. You going to the sheriff with that? I'm trying. He doesn't have to try far. At the turnoff near the old quarry, a county cruiser idles in the shade of a rock shelf. Deputy Paul Brenner lifts his sunglasses, eyes creasing into a practiced smile. Caleb, you holding up? Caleb holds up the vest. Found something of yours at Aaron's house. For just a moment, less than a heartbeat, something flickers across Brenner's face. Then it's gone, replaced by easy recognition. Huh. Well, I'll be... Miriam, bless that woman. Once took this to wash after I spilled stew at breakfast. I'd stopped by to talk about those development pushers nosing around. She insisted on cleaning it. He chuckles, glances at his watch. I'd love to catch up, but I've got to make a meeting. Let's talk tomorrow. My office. First thing, a black truck rolls by. The same unmarked one from Jacob's place. Brenner's eyes tick after it for just a second. Take care, Caleb. The cruiser starts. Pulls away. For a mile he drives in silence, the vest on the passenger seat like a question he can't quite phrase. He dials Mary. Did Miriam ever wash things for folks? Uniforms? A breath. Miriam washed anything that needed washing. Once she got stew out of Brother Jensen's deacon jacket with grated soap and sunlight. Said sinners and stains both pretend to be permanent. He wants that to be enough. It almost is. At the next bend, the black truck's dust hangs a little too thick over the road, and Caleb stands there in the dust, holding a vest that should have been returned 6 years ago, watching a deputy drive toward the ridge with the same calm he'd had when he closed Aaron's case after less than a week. There's a moment in every mystery when the pieces are all there, scattered like bones in the sand, and you realize you've been staring at the answer the whole time without seeing it. Caleb is standing in that moment now. He drives on, past the quarry, past the sign for the old logging road, and at the base of the ridge, where there had been nothing but scrub 2 summers ago, a low glass and steel office appears. Land Development Associates, says the frosted door. Inside, a receptionist in the dark, logo-less uniform slides a visitor sheet toward him without looking up. A man in a crisp suit appears with a smile that never reaches his eyes. I'm Mr. Davidson. You've got family acreage? We should talk. These old parcels can be so underused. He offers half a fair market value. When Caleb doesn't respond, Davidson unfolds a topographic map. The Whitaker parcel glows in red. And up in the corner, partially covered by Davidson's hand, a mountain site is circled twice in pencil. What's that? Caleb asks. Future Civic Project. Unrelated. Davidson taps the map, fingernail ticking against the laminate. Groundbreaking is Monday at 8 a.m. Press walkthrough Wednesday. Windows are small out here. Weather, permits, donors. If you're thinking of selling, this is the hour. The words pass as logistics, but dates turn air into a countdown. But through the window, behind the receptionist's shoulder, the black truck noses past the office toward the mountain road. And following it, slow, easy, like it just happens to be going the same direction, a county cruiser. The mountain road isn't meant for regular trucks. Washboard grooves rattle Caleb's bones. Junipers whip the paint. The road climbs through layers of red and cream stone until it levels into a scarred-off clearing. Chain-link fence. A half-frame structure with a prim-peaked roof and fake pioneer trim. A sign wired to the fence. Desert Pioneer Heritage Center. Coming soon. And there, standing with the 2 dark uniformed men near an excavator, is Deputy Paul Brenner, their voices carrying the thin desert air. To receipt the stuff up, the memorial, the story of the simple folks who couldn't keep up with modern life. Very moving, very bankable. The holdouts will need encouragement. You'll steer it, officer. Like before. Brenner's jaw shifts. He doesn't say no. The first man waved the excavator over, points to a mark of orange paint on the ground. Right here. Not deep. Caleb grabs a hard hat and safety vest left on a fence post, slips through a loose panel, keeps his head down. He gets close enough to see when the bucket scoops the second time. close enough to see the operator flinch, close enough to see something pale rise from the churned earth. The first man jumps down, reaches into the soil, and lifts a bone, long, clean, unmistakably human. See, the man grins at Brenner. Storage, convenient, and if a few more go missing before the ribbon cutting, well, desert ground is hungry. The taste of metal floods Caleb's mouth. He backs away, careful, sheds the borrowed gear, runs for his truck. Halfway down the grade, the first bars of cell reception buzz to life. 911, what's your emergency? His voice comes out ragged, breathless. My name is Caleb Whitaker. I need to report multiple murders and a corrupt deputy. The line crackles. Sir, your location? Bars stutter. The call dies. In the rear view, two hard pinpoints swell. The black truck. He kills his headlights for 3 breaths, noses onto the old logging spur, heart ricocheting. 1 bar again. He redials. Base of the ridge above Red Mesa. Heritage Center site. Chain link fence. They're moving earth. Stay on the line. Gravel spits. The truck slides past the spur, pauses, then rolls on. Caleb waits until its taillights sink into the wash before easing back to the grade. Sirens grow from a whisper to a wall of sound. State cruisers pass him in a blur of light. He follows them back up the mountain. Officers pour through the fence. The sergeant on point doesn't argue when Caleb gestures toward the fresh trench. 2 crime scene techs jump down. One straightens, eyes wide. Human remains. There are truths that arrive like sirens, and others that arrive like a wrong color in clean light. For 6 years, Red Mesa mistook silence for peace and neat patterns for safety. But patterns break where a single hue won't fit. A vest on a line, a mark in the dirt, the ground speaking at last. Late is not the same as never. Late today is loud enough. Notice the color that doesn't belong. Ask the small question that makes big men nervous. Brenner turns like a man remembering he could run, then stops at the crack of a warning shot. The developers get 3 steps toward their truck before a trooper's voice cuts them to the gravel. Hands laced, knees down, cuffs bite home, and the facade of the Heritage Center, with its fake pioneer windows and prim peaked roof, looks absurdly delicate in the wash of red and blue lights. Down the mountain, at the glass office of Land Development Associates, more cruisers converge. Davidson tries to hold the smile. It crumbles. The receptionist's phone falls from her hand and clatters on the desk like something breaking. Inside locked filing cabinets, investigators find boxes filled with glossy architectural renderings and topographic overlays. Property deeds marked in red. Financial projections that speak in cold numbers about displacement and profit margins. And in one box, under a stack of prospectuses for the Heritage Center, a small bronze plaque waiting to be mounted on a future wall. Desert Pioneer Heritage Center, preserving the memory of Red Mesa's past. Memory, one of the investigators will say later. Not presence, not people, just memory. As if the living could be turned into exhibits without anyone noticing the difference. At the county building, State Detective Sarah Chin meets Caleb in a small room with pale green walls and a table scarred by years of coffee cups and clasped hands. Her voice is quiet, professional, but there's something in her eyes that says she's seen this before. The moment when a person realizes that evil doesn't always announce itself with darkness and thunder. Sometimes it sits across from you at Sunday dinner, smiles, asks for seconds. Tell me everything, she says. He does. The memorial, the laundry line, the vest from the cedar chest, Jacob's doorstep, the unmarked truck, Davidson's map, the fake heritage site, the bone rising from red earth like an accusation the ground could no longer hold. She listens without interrupting. takes notes in careful script. And when he's finished, she slides a seized journal across the table in a clear evidence sleeve. Davidson's handwriting. Meticulous, organized, the penmanship of a man who believed in the righteousness of his own vision. Lists of parcels, initials beside prices, a column labeled leverage, another labeled cooperation, PB, Paul Brenner. He fed them everything. Detective Chin says. Who would resist? Who might bend? Which families were vulnerable? Which ones had enough stubbornness to be a problem? She pauses. When your brother refused to sell, they didn't just move on to the next name on the list. They decided to remove the obstacle. Caleb stares at the page until the letters swim. Brenner ran the investigation, he says. His voice sounds hollow. He's the one who told us the note seemed genuine, that Aaron probably just needed space, that these things happen. He did more than that, Jim replies. She turns to another page in the journal, a calendar, dates circled, and beside one, October 12, 1974, a single notation, A.W. morning visit, arranged. The day Aaron and his family disappeared. We believe Brenner went to the house that morning, Chung continues. Told them there was an urgent matter up on the ridge, a safety concern, maybe a lost hiker, maybe an accident, something that required Aaron's help as a member of the community, something that would make sense for the whole family to come along, keep the kids occupied while the adults handled whatever needed handling. Caleb closes his eyes. He can see it. Aaron, always the first to help. Miriam, gathering the children. Naomi, uncertain but trusting. Little Daisy in someone's arms. They drove up together, Chin says. And when they arrived at that clearing, Davidson's men were waiting. It was fast. Clinical. They'd done this before. Not murder, maybe, but the mechanics of making problems disappear. Afterward, they buried them where they planned to build. And then they waited. Let time do its work. Let grief turn into acceptance. Let the community move on. But they couldn't move on, Caleb whispers. Not completely. Not when there were still questions. So they waited longer. Chun agrees. 6 years. Long enough for the sharpest edges of suspicion to dull. Long enough to come back and finish what they started. Turn the burial ground into a monument. Sanitize the crime by making it invisible. Hide bodies under a celebration of the very people they'd erased. The thing about monsters, we learn, is that they rarely look like monsters. Paul Brenner didn't have hollow eyes or a serpent smile. He had a badge and a calm voice, and a way of making you feel like your concerns mattered. He showed up at community events, helped with hay bales, remembered the names of people's children. He was the kind of man you'd trust with your life. And 7 people did. Davidson wasn't a caricature of corporate evil. He didn't cackle over blueprints or rub his hands together in shadowy rooms. He talked about progress and opportunity. He offered money, not enough, but money nonetheless. He probably believed, in his own carefully constructed moral universe, that he was doing something worthwhile, creating jobs, bringing tourism, honoring heritage. Never mind that the heritage he was honoring had been murdered and buried beneath his vision of the future. This is the thing that keeps us awake at night, isn't it? Not the strangers in the dark, not the obvious predators, but the realization that harm can wear a uniform and a smile. That betrayal can come from the person who ate at your table. That the systems we trust to protect us can be the very mechanisms of our destruction. A knock at the door interrupts the silence. A forensic technician enters. Young, careful, the kind of person who's learned to deliver terrible news with gentle precision. Preliminary findings, she says softly. Adult male, adult female, a second adult female, and children in multiple age ranges. 6 to 8 individuals total, dating to roughly the mid-1970s. She pauses, looks at Caleb with something like apology in her eyes. We'll need DNA confirmation, but the count and ages line up with the Whitaker family. The room tilts, steadies, tilts again, 6 to 8, not 7, 6 to 8. Why the range? Caleb hears himself ask. Some of the remains are fragmented. The tech explains. We're working to establish exact numbers. It's possible there are additional individuals we haven't fully accounted for yet, or the range reflects preservation variables. Additional individuals. Caleb thinks about the other families at the creek, the ones who'd resisted selling, the ones who'd stopped attending ward meetings for reasons no one quite understood, the silences that had accumulated like dust over the years. How many families had said no to Davidson's vision? How many obstacles had been removed from the path of progress? The evidence trays arrive in sealed boxes. Detective Chin opens them one at a time with the solemnity of someone handling sacred objects. A small shoe, child-sized, the leather cracked but the buckle still intact. A braid tie with faded ribbon, the kind Naomi used to weave into Sarah's hair every Sunday morning. Cloth thin as onion skin, patterned with tiny flowers. A piece of someone's Sunday dress. And a belt buckle, silver, tarnished now, with the initials AW carved into the back. Aaron had worn it in every fishing photograph Caleb could remember, had worn it the day he married Miriam, had probably been wearing it the morning he loaded his family into the truck and drove up the mountain road toward what he thought was just another Saturday of helping someone in need. Caleb's mother, Esther, arrives with Mary. She moves slowly, as if the air is thickened into something she must push through. In her hands, she carries a faded porch photograph, the one from the memorial, the one with the laundry line in the background. She doesn't speak when the evidence trays are shown to her, doesn't gasp or cry out. She simply stands there, one hand pressed to her chest, and stares at the small shoe as if trying to remember which grandchild had worn it last. Then, very gently, she touches a corner of the photograph to the edge of the tray. Just a tap, like knocking on a door to see if anyone's home. "They're coming home," Caleb whispers into her hair. "Not to that ridge. To our cemetery, where they belong. To names on stone and flowers, and people who remember them as more than just a story about what went wrong." Esther nods. Just once. And a single tear traces down her cheek and disappears into the collar of her dress. The trials will come later. Months of testimony and evidence, and lawyers arguing about intent and premeditation and degrees of culpability. Paul Brenner will sit in the defendant's chair with the same calm he'd had at Sunday dinners, as if confusion and grief were things that happened to other people. He'll maintain that he was trying to help, that he'd been caught between impossible pressures, that no one was supposed to get hurt. The recordings from the ridge will say otherwise. The journal will say otherwise. The bones will say otherwise. Davidson will have better lawyers, will argue that he never personally harmed anyone, that he'd hired contractors to handle site preparation, and wasn't aware of the specific methods they employed. That profit and murder are separate things, even when they occupy the same ground. The jury will take 3 days to decide he's wrong. The other men, the ones in dark uniforms with no badges, will turn on each other with predictable viciousness of people who never believed they'd actually face consequences. One will claim he was just following orders. Another will say he thought the bones were already there, that they were just moving them. A third will stay silent and take a plea deal in exchange for details about other sites, other families, other problems that were solved with shovels and silence. But all of that comes later. Right now, in this moment, Caleb stands in the county building parking lot as the sun drops toward the horizon and turns the desert into layers of gold and crimson. The kind of light that makes everything look both beautiful and temporary. Detective Chin walks out to where he's standing. "We'll need you to come back tomorrow," she says. More questions. Identification process. Logistics of bringing them home. He nods. "Caleb," she says, and there's something in her voice that makes him look at her directly. "You found them. After 6 years of silence, you found them. That's not nothing." "I found a vest," he says, "in a photograph. 6 years late." "You found a thread," she corrects, "and you pulled it. A lot of people would have looked at that photo and seen laundry. You saw the question. That matters." The drive back to Red Mesa takes him past Jacob's house. The fundamentalist father is standing on his porch, watching the road. When he sees Caleb's truck, he raises one hand in a gesture that's half wave, half salute. Caleb pulls over, walks up the dirt path to where Jacob stands. "They found them," Caleb says, "up on the ridge, right where they were planning to build their monument." Jacob's jaw works. "How many?" "At least 7. Maybe more." "God have mercy," Jacob whispers. "The deputy wasn't on it," Caleb continues. "The one who ran the investigation. The one who ate dinner with us. He helped them." Jacob closes his eyes. "Do you know what frightens me most?" he asks. "Not that they killed, not even that they buried the bodies and tried to build on top of them. It's that they almost got away with it. 6 years. If you hadn't noticed that vest, if you hadn't kept looking, they would have opened a heritage center and charged admission, and people would have walked over my friend's grave without ever knowing he was there." "But they didn't get away with it," Caleb says. "That has to count for something." "Does it?" Jacob asks. "Aaron's still gone. Miriam, Naomi, the children, still gone. Justice doesn't bring them back. It just means their murderers will be in cages instead of driving past our homes in black trucks." Caleb has no answer for that, because Jacob is right. The scales don't balance. They never do. At the ward building, Bishop Morrison is locking up after an evening meeting. He sees Caleb and stops, keys jangling in his hand. "I heard," he says simply. "The whole ward has heard by now. I'm so sorry, Caleb. So deeply sorry. They're going to need a funeral," Caleb says. "A real one, not a memorial for missing people. A burial, with names." "We'll do it," the bishop promises. "Whatever you need, however long it takes." "I keep thinking about that morning," Caleb says. "The morning they disappeared. Brenner probably knocked on the door with his nice smile and his reasonable voice and some story about needing Aaron's help. And Aaron, being Aaron, said yes. Because that's what you do. You help. You trust. You believe that people who break bread with you don't want you dead. That's what we're taught," the bishop says quietly. "Faith, trust, community." "Maybe we're taught wrong," Caleb replies. "Maybe we should be more suspicious, more guarded. Maybe if Aaron had been less trusting, he'd still be alive." The bishop shakes his head. "Or maybe the problem isn't that Aaron trusted. Maybe the problem is that Brenner was trustworthy right up until the moment he wasn't. You can't live your whole life waiting for good people to turn bad. That's not faith. That's just fear. Right now," Caleb says, "fear seems more honest." 3 months later, on a Saturday morning when the desert air is cool and the light slants gold across the red rock, 7 caskets are lowered into the earth at the Red Mesa Cemetery. The whole ward attends. The Creek families come too, filling the spaces between the mainstream members like pieces of a puzzle that almost fits. State officials stand at a respectful distance. Detective Chun is there, and several of the forensic team members who work the site. The caskets are simple pine, handmade by men from both communities working side by side. Each one is marked with name and dates that now have endings. Aaron Whitaker, Miriam Whitaker, Naomi Whitaker, Eli Whitaker, Michael Whitaker, Sarah Whitaker, Ruth Whitaker. 7 names, 7 lives, 7 absences that can finally stop being questions and start being grief. Daisy's casket is the smallest. She would have been 8 years old when they disappeared. Just a child who probably didn't understand why they were getting in the truck that morning, who probably asked if they'd be home in time for her to play with her cousins. Caleb stands beside his mother, holding her upright as the bishop speaks about rest and reunion and things being made right in the eternities. The words wash over him like water. He hears them without listening. What he listens to instead is the wind in the cottonwoods, the distant sound of a hawk crying, the shuffle of feet, and the quiet weeping of people who knew these names when they belonged to people, not just the stones and memories. Mary steps forward and places a Relief Society ribbon on Miriam's casket. She was the best of us, she whispers. Always the first to help. Always the first to see when someone was hurting. Always the first to show up with a casserole and a hug, and the kind of love that didn't need words. Rebecca places a child's drawing on Sarah's casket. Something saved from the memorial table, a crayon picture of a house and a family and a sun that takes up half the sky. She drew this in primary. Rebecca says she was always drawing, always imagining. I used to think she'd grow up to be an artist. One by one, people step forward, place flowers, share memories, speak names that have been held in silence for too long. When it's Caleb's turn, he kneels beside Aaron's casket and presses his palm flat against the wood. You trusted the wrong person, he says, voice low enough that only the dead can hear. You wanted to help. You believed in the goodness of your neighbor, and it got you killed. But that doesn't mean you were wrong to trust, Aaron. It means Brenner was wrong to betray. The failure was his, not yours. Remember that, wherever you are, the failure was his. The headstones are installed 2 weeks later. Simple granite, names and dates, and a single line of scripture that the family chose together. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. It's not quite right, Caleb thinks, because they didn't get to run or walk. They were stopped mid-stride, cut down in the middle of an ordinary Saturday that should have been nothing more than a drive up a mountain road to help someone in need. But maybe the scripture isn't about what they got to do. Maybe it's about what they deserved, what they should have had. A full life, time to run, time to rest, time. The Desert Pioneer Heritage Center never opens. The half-built structure is demolished. The land is deeded to a conservation trust that will keep it empty. No buildings, no monuments, no sanitized versions of history. Just desert and wind, and the kind of silence that doesn't try to cover anything up. Davidson's company dissolves in a cascade of lawsuits and criminal proceedings. The other properties they'd acquired are returned to families they'd pressured into selling. The architectural renderings and glossy prospectuses are filed away as evidence of ambition that crossed too many lines. Brenner's trial lasts 6 weeks. The prosecution presents a journal, the recordings, the testimony of the developers who'd worked with him. They present the financial records showing payments made to a deputy's salary that couldn't be explained by law enforcement work. They present the vest, the one Miriam had washed, the one that ended up folded in a cedar chest because someone, probably Naomi, had known on some instinctive level that something was wrong, that this object didn't belong in their house, that it should be saved, preserved, hidden until someone asked the right questions. Brenner's lawyer argues coercion, claimed his client had been threatened, that he'd feared for his own life, that he'd been caught in an impossible situation and had made decisions no one should have to make. The jury takes 4 hours to convict him of 7 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy. At sentencing, the judge speaks about betrayal of public trust, about the special responsibility carried by those who wear badges, about the way corruption poisons not just individual cases, but entire communities' ability to believe in justice. You didn't just kill 7 people, the judge says. You killed the faith that allows communities like Red Mesa to function. You made every future interaction between law enforcement and these families more difficult. You made trust a luxury they can no longer afford. That damage can't be quantified. It can't be repaired. It can only be acknowledged. Life in prison. 7 consecutive terms. No possibility of parole. Evil rarely announces itself. It borrows your uniform and your smile. So you learn to read the laundry, not the badge. Brenner doesn't react. Just stands there with the same calm he'd had in the patrol car that day when Caleb handed him the vest. As if none of this is really happening. As if it's all just some administrative error that will get sorted out eventually. A year passes. Then another. The ward holds services. Children grow. Families move in and move out. Life continues in the way it always does, flowing around tragedy like water around stone. But something has changed. The people at the creek no longer smile quite as easily when unfamiliar cars drive past. They take down license plate numbers. They ask more questions. They trust less freely. The mainstream ward members do the same. When strangers show up at community events, someone makes sure to know who invited them. When developers come knocking with offers and plans, the conversations happen in groups, never alone, and someone always takes notes. The innocence is gone. The easy faith that neighbors want your best. The assumption that authority figures have your interests at heart. It's a kind of death too. Smaller, quieter, but real nonetheless. Caleb visits the cemetery every Sunday after services. Brings flowers when they're in season. In winter, just his presence. He stands there in the wind and talks to his brother about things that don't matter. Whether ward gossip, whose kids are getting married, which crops did well this year. He never talks about the trial. Never talks about Brenner or Davidson or the Heritage Center. That will never be built. Those things don't belong here, in this place where 7 names are finally at rest. His mother comes less often now. The walk from the parking area to the grave sites has gotten harder for her. But on fast Sundays, she insists, Caleb helps her across the uneven ground, his arm linked through hers, and they stand together in silence while the wind moves through the grass. "Do you think they knew?" she asked one afternoon. At the end, do you think they understood what was happening? Caleb considers lying, considers offering comfort, but she's asking a real question, and she deserves a real answer. "I don't know, Mama." The detective said it was probably fast, that they likely didn't have time to be afraid. But I don't know if that's true or just something she said to make it easier. Esther nods slowly. Miriam was smart. She would have seen. She would have known something was wrong when it got to that clearing. And there was no lost hiker, no accident, just men with tools and cold eyes. She would have tried to protect the children, tried to get between them and whatever was coming. Yes, Caleb agrees. She would have. I hope, Esther says quietly, that they were together at the end, that they didn't die alone or separated. That's what I pray for. Not that it didn't happen, I know it happened, but that in those last moments, they had each other. Caleb squeezes her hand. I pray for that too. On the 6th anniversary of the discovery, not of the disappearance, but of the finding, the ward holds a special service. Not a memorial this time. Something different. A dedication. They plant 7 cottonwood trees in a line along the cemetery fence. Young saplings that will take years to grow tall, but will eventually create shade and shelter and the sound of whispering leaves in the desert wind. Aaron's tree, Miriam's, Naomi's, Eli's, Michael's, Sarah's, Ruth's, Daisy's, 8 trees, because in the end, the forensic team had confirmed 8 sets of remains, not 7. The 8th was never identified. DNA didn't match any missing persons reports. No family came forward to claim them, but someone had been buried in that clearing alongside the Whitaker family. Someone else who'd said no to the wrong people at the wrong time. Someone whose name is lost but whose presence is acknowledged. The 8 trees stand a little apart from the others. Unknown reads a small marker at its base. But not forgotten. Detective Chen attends a dedication. She's moved on to other cases now. There's always another investigation, another family waiting for answers. But she made time to drive out to Red Mesa for this. Afterward, she and Caleb walked through the cemetery together, past headstones that date back to the founding of the community. Pioneer names. Familiar surnames that repeat across generations. "Do you have closure?" she asks. Caleb considers the question. "I don't think closure is real," he says finally. "I think we just get used to living with the wound. It doesn't heal. We just learn to carry it." "That's darker than I expected." "You asked." She smiles slightly. "I did." They walk a few more steps. "For what it's worth, the work you did. Finding that vest, following the thread, it mattered, not just for your family. We were able to connect Davidson's operation to 2 other sites, one in Nevada, one in Arizona, for more families, 11 more bodies. Without your case breaking open, those people would still be missing, still be questions instead of graves." Caleb stops walking. 11? 11. All fundamentalist families who own land in areas targeted for development. All disappeared between 1972 and 1978. All investigated by local law enforcement who had financial ties to the developers. She pauses. "Your brother's family wasn't the first. They weren't even the last. But they're the ones who finally brought the whole operation down. Because of laundry," Caleb says, "because Miriam or Naomi washed a vest and put on a line, and someone took a photograph before they left. Because of laundry." Chun agrees. Because of a detail that seemed meaningless until suddenly it wasn't. That's how most cases break. Not dramatic confessions or smoking guns. Just small inconsistencies that someone notices and refuses to ignore. That night, Caleb sits at his kitchen table with the original photograph spread out before him. The one from the sheriff's office. The one that started everything. He looks at Aaron's face. Miriam holding Daisy. Naomi in the background, uncertain and present all at once. The children lined up. The laundry on the line. And he thinks about the person who took this photograph. Probably a neighbor stopping by. Or a family friend. Someone who said, "Let me get a picture before you go," the way people do when families are gathered and the light is good. Did that person know they were documenting something important? Did they sense that this moment, this ordinary Saturday morning with wet laundry and children in their good clothes, was the last time anyone would see these people alive? Probably not. Probably they just thought it was a nice photo. A family heading out for the day. Nothing special. Nothing to worry about. That's the thing about last moments. We almost never recognize them while they're happening. We don't know which goodbye will be the final one, which photograph will be the last, which ordinary Saturday will be the one that never gets a Sunday. Years later, a journalist will write a book about the case, about the web of corruption that stretched across 3 states and claimed at least 18 lives, probably more that were never found, about the families who trusted the wrong people, about the communities that learned to be suspicious, about the deputy who smiled at Sunday dinners while planning murders. The journalist will interview Caleb. will ask him about the vest, the photograph, the moment he realized what he'd found. What do you want people to understand? The journalist will ask. If someone reads this book, what's the one thing you hope they take away? Caleb will think for a long time before answering. That evil is ordinary, he'll say finally. That's what people need to understand. It doesn't announce itself with thunder and darkness. It sits across from you at dinner. It helps you move hay. It wears a badge and a smile and speaks in reasonable tones about progress and the future. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not asking questions and noticing the small things that don't quite fit, it will bury you and build a monument on your grave and charge admission for people to visit the sanitized version of your death. The journalist will write that down, will use it as the epigraph of the book, and readers will encounter those words before they even reach the first chapter, will be warned in Caleb's voice that the monster in this story looked like everyone else right up until the moment he didn't. But that's still years away. Right now, on this evening in Red Mesa, Caleb folds a photograph and puts it back in its protective sleeve. He's made copies for family members who wanted them. The original will go to the County Historical Society, where it will be preserved and cataloged and, eventually, displayed as part of an exhibit about the case. Future students will stand in front of that photograph and analyze it. We'll point to the vest on the laundry line. We'll discuss evidentiary details and investigative techniques. We'll write papers about visual forensics and the importance of photographic evidence. But they won't see what Caleb sees when he looks at it. They'll see evidence. He sees his brother's family, alive, together, not knowing that in less than an hour, they'll be driving up a mountain road toward a clearing where men with shovels are waiting. They'll see a case study. He sees Daisy's small hand in her mother's grip, sees Eli standing tall, try to look grown-up, sees Sarah's shy smile and Ruth's impatient squirm, and Michael's hand reaching toward his brother's shoulder. They'll see history. He sees Saturday morning, bread cooling, laundry drying, an ordinary day that should have ended with dinner and stories and tucking children into bed. Should have, didn't. That gap between should and did, that's where his family lives now. In the space between what was supposed to happen and what actually did, between trust and betrayal, between helping a neighbor and being murdered for profit. The wind picks up outside, rattling the window frames the way it does on autumn evenings when the temperature drops and the desert exhales the day's heat back into the darkening sky. Caleb stands, turns off a kitchen light, walks through his house, checking locks the way he does every night now, a habit he never had before, but can't seem to break. In his bedroom, he pauses at the window that faces toward the ridge, toward the place where the Heritage Center was supposed to stand, where his brother's body was buried for 6 years under men's plans and ambitions. The ridge is dark now, just a silhouette against the stars. Empty, returned to silence. But Caleb knows what's there. What was there? What could have stayed there forever if not for a photograph and a flash of yellow in a line of laundry? He thinks about all the other clearings in all the other deserts, all the other places where bodies might be buried under other people's plans, all the families who disappeared and were explained away and forgotten. How many of them are still waiting to be found? How many photographs exist with details no one has noticed yet? How many threads are waiting to be pulled? Sleep doesn't come easily these days. It never has, not since that Sunday morning when Daniel pointed at the photograph and asked about wet laundry. But Caleb lies down anyway, closes his eyes and listens to the wind, and in the dark, behind his eyelids, he sees the laundry line, white shirts, denim, soft pastels, and there, bright yellow. Wrong. Out of place. A warning that came 6 years too late, but a warning nonetheless. Evidence that somewhere in the pattern of an ordinary life, the truth was hanging in plain sight, drying in the desert wind, waiting for someone to notice. waiting for someone to ask the question that would unravel everything. Why is there wet laundry on the line? Such a simple question. Such terrible answers. This is what haunts us, isn't it? Not the dramatic moments, not the obvious signs of danger, but the small details we miss, the things we see without seeing, the patterns that don't quite fit, but we explain away because the alternative is too troubling to consider. We want to believe that evil announces itself, that we'd recognize it if it came for us, that we'd see the danger in time to save ourselves and the people we love. But Aaron Whitaker ate dinner with his murderer once a month, trusted him, welcomed him into his home, probably never imagined that the man helping to move hay would be the same man who'd help bury his family in an unmarked grave. Miriam washed that vest, hung it on the line to dry, probably thought she was just being helpful, being kind, being the person she'd always been, first to help, first to care, first to see when someone needed something. She couldn't have known that the vest would become evidence, that 6 years later, someone would look at a photograph and see not kindness, but a clue, a thread leading back to truth. Small acts, small details, small questions. That's how the world changes. Not with thunder, with whispers, with someone noticing that the pattern is wrong and refusing to look away. The cottonwoods in the cemetery will grow tall in time, will create shade for future visitors, will make that sound like whispering pages when the wind moves through their leaves. Aaron and Miriam and Naomi and the children, Eli, Michael, Sarah, Ruth, Daisy, will rest beneath them, their names carved in stone, their lives reduced to dates and a line of scripture about running and walking and not being weary. And people will visit, will place flowers, will stand in silence and remember. But what they'll remember is up to them. They can remember the victims, the lives cut short, the family that vanished on a Saturday morning. Or they can remember the detail, the vest, the question, the refusal to accept easy answers when the truth was hanging on a laundry line, bright and yellow and wrong. They can remember how close evil came to winning, how nearly the Heritage Center opened, how almost a body stayed buried under monuments to progress. Or they can remember that someone noticed, someone pulled the thread, someone asked, "Why is there wet laundry on the line?" Both memories are true, both matter, but only one of them contains a lesson we can carry forward. So here's what we take from Red Mesa, from that Sunday morning in 1980, when a small group of people gathered around a folding table and really looked, at a photograph they'd seen 100 times before. Notice the details that don't fit. Ask the questions that seem small. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even if you can't explain why. Don't be so eager for easy answers that you ignore the hard truths hanging in plain sight. Remember that evil is ordinary until suddenly it isn't. That betrayal comes from the people we break bread with. That trust is precious and fragile and can be weaponized by those who understand its power. And remember, always remember, that 6 years is a long time to wait for justice, but it's better than forever. The Whitaker family came home. Their names are on stones. Their trees are growing. Their story is told. Not everyone gets that. Not every missing person is found. Not every question is answered. But this one was. Because someone looked at laundry and asked why. There are things we notice too late. A shadow that shouldn't fall where it does. A color that won't sit politely inside a familiar pattern. In Red Mesa. Too late turned out to be just in time for the truth. Late enough to hurt, early enough to stop the monument, to raise names in stone, to plant shade for the living. This is still a story about a photograph, about laundry, about silence and how it ends. Because once you learn to hear the wind for more than weather, once you train your eye for the color that doesn't belong, Ordinary evil loses its best disguise. The vest on the line did not bring anyone back. It did something smaller and harder. It taught a town to notice, and from now on, when the pattern is almost perfect and the light is almost kind, someone here will ask the simple question out loud in time, why is there wet laundry on the line?